Senator Hughes. Senator Marielle Smith.
Thank you, Deputy President. I rise today to speak on one of the motivations which drives me most to be here in this position representing South Australians, and that is the importance of supporting, uplifting and standing side by side with South Australian families, of advancing their aspirations for themselves and for their children. Family is everything. It is the most important thread that runs through most of our lives, whether it's the family we are born into or whether it's the family that we choose for ourselves and that we build for ourselves. Building, protecting, growing and providing for family of whatever size, whatever shape, whatever makeup is what drives all the South Australians that I speak to. Because for these South Australians, family is everything. But when family is broken, when it is strained, when it is under pressure, we find that family failure becomes the source of what goes wrong for too many in our communities, for too many individuals and for our society. And today I want to talk about an issue that is putting many Australians under strain and that has for many families worsened during this pandemic. And that is the challenge of balancing work, care and their family responsibilities. But before I do, I want to acknowledge that this Australian family unit has changed drastically in recent decades. Blended and step families are more common, as are extended households, where more than 2 generations live under the same roof. This is sometimes in order to address a lack of access to care for younger ones or the elderly. Other times it's there to facilitate better care of those in need, those with disability, those who need extra support. And in this place, we should be aware of the way the family unit is constantly changing and evolving and how that impacts and interacts with how we craft policy responses to these changes, to take into account the needs of all people, of all families, when it comes to balancing work and care. But today, especially, I want to speak with a particular focus about the work and family and care situation of workers in an industry about which I am very passionate, those in the retail, fast food and warehousing industries. Because we have found that over the past 2 years that, along with, of course, doctors, nurses, other hospital staff, among many others, these workers are truly essential workers. During lockdowns, they went to work. They fronted up each day. Many endured the most vile abuse and were expected to manage crowd control on top of their usual duties. Some were expected to somehow manage amongst all of this stress and pressure during times where the communities were locked down, the additional caring responsibilities that they were responsible for as well. Those caring responsibilities which didn't go away when schools were closed, but they still had to turn up to work, cobbling together a mix of formal and informal care, an incredible strain and pressure on many of these families. And many worked in lockdown parts of our country without having access to vaccines, in part because of the government's appallingly slow rollout. But yet, despite these sacrifices, which we know are so great from these workers, they were given the recognition they deserved as essential workers far too late, the support they needed far too late. Too often, our retail workers, our fast food workers, those working in warehousing haven't been rewarded for their heroic contribution during this pandemic, and they certainly haven't been rewarded when it comes to their wages. They aren't being recognised when it comes to managing the competing demands of work, family and caring responsibilities with this essential work. 55% of participants in a recent University of New South Wales Social Policy Research Centre study into the work, family and care responsibilities of workers in these sectors said they regularly provide some form of care to another person. That could be in the form of caring for a child, a grandchild, or for an older person, a person with disability or a person with long-term health conditions. This rate is much higher than the broader population. Indeed, ABS stats of the broader population suggest that 1 in 9 Australians, or 11%, provide unpaid care to people with a disability and older Australians. Now, this report of members of the union representing these workers, the SDA, found that the number of workers in this field was 24%. This report finds that many workers in retail, fast food and warehousing are struggling to balance the responsibilities of their work, care and their families. Deputy President, we need to drastically rethink the way we think about care in Australia and the way that we make and deliver policy about care. Because care, whether for a child, for our elderly, for those with disability or otherwise, cannot be an afterthought in the design of either social or economic policy. Providing care is one of the most important jobs a person can have. Those in formal care work should be recognised as such, with good wages, good conditions and real security in the work that they do. And we must do more to value and recognise informal care, that care that our parents, friends, aunties, uncles and, for an increasing number of Australians, grandparents do, to raise children in particular. It is clearly an emotionally rewarding experience for many, and I feel that in our family very deeply. But it can be exhausting. Many will call it the hardest job they ever have. There are things government can do to make life easier for these Australians who are supporting our society, who are supporting those in the workforce and supporting our essential workers. And for our essential workers, we can help give them better choice when it comes to their care arrangements and how they are managed around their employment. And we can ensure that the benefits that come from the now celebrated increased flexibility in workplace arrangements are felt not just by employers, but employees who deserve and who are entitled to balance to life outside of their work and to manage and maintain their responsibilities outside of work. We can also minimise the amount of workers in these industries, as well as the caring industries, who are kept on rolling casual contracts for years, by giving them security and a stronger hand when negotiating rosters. The UNSW report I referred to earlier highlights a number of key findings when it comes to managing work and caring responsibilities. And first, and this will come as no surprise to anyone paying attention to this sector, that access to formal early education and care is one of the most significant barriers. Of course, this matters not just in terms of supporting care arrangements, but also in terms of supporting the early development of children, which I've spoken about extensively in this place. But when it comes to supporting care arrangements, to enabling parents to participate in work, to participate in essential work, they are hampered by the cost of childcare, which is preventing too many families from participation. Childcare fees have skyrocketed under this government, in fact by almost 40% since the Liberals were elected. And for many families, this is holding back their aspirations and their opportunities in work. Of those surveyed in the UNSW report, 43% of mothers and 35% of fathers with children under 12 or under wanted to work more hours but were unable to because they couldn't access care. Many reported turning down shifts because care was so expensive they were better off staying at home. And this is a crucial point to consider when we hear about labour shortages, as we have in recent weeks. And yet, knowing all of this, the Morrison government has proposed a childcare policy which doesn't go nearly far enough, which rips any extra support away from families with 2 children in care once the older child goes to school, and completely leaves out parents with 1 child in care, 74% of families. Australian families pay some of the highest rates of childcare in the world, and that's why Labor has a plan to relieve this pressure. We have a plan to increase the childcare subsidy rate for every Australian family earning less than $530,000. But beyond the issue of access to childcare, we know too that while so many workers have benefited from Labor's nation-changing reform of paid parental leave, there is still more work to do in this project. We know the gaps in superannuation, including things like the fact that superannuation is not paid on paid parental leave payments, contributes to the super gap, contributes to the fact that women in their older years, in their older age, are contributing to the part of the fastest growing cohort of people experiencing homelessness, of people experiencing poverty at that stage in their life. And there are things we can do about that. There are policy choices we can make to fix that and to enhance it, just as there are in care. We owe our essential workers who have endured so much during this pandemic, who have taken on not only the additional burdens of the stress of this work during these difficult times, but who have still had to manage and balance their care and family responsibilities with their work and have felt so unsupported in doing so. These workers deserve better. They deserve a clearer look at our policy levers to make sure they are supported, and they deserve acknowledgement, not just in thanks, but in their pay, their conditions and the support we give them.